Hello everyone, and welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, I'm excited to share a story that may make you reflect on how rigid management can affect the work environment and the mindset of employees in a tech company. This story starts when a team working in a tech company faced a new project manager whose management style was very strict. He applied rigid 9-to-5 work-hour regulations and excessively controlled the team's tasks, making the work atmosphere suffocating. The problem was that these rules did not take into account the flexibility and creativity that tech work requires, which caused deep dissatisfaction within the team. While the goal of these rules might have been to improve efficiency and ensure everyone worked according to schedule, the reality was quite the opposite. Team members, who were used to working flexibly, found it difficult to be effective when confined to fixed working hours. The inability to take advantage of optimal working hours during late afternoons, when everyone found their flow, led to a noticeable decline in productivity and work quality. Projects were delayed, simple tasks became more challenging, and all of these problems stemmed from the lack of flexibility in the work policy. One key event in this story is the Zoom meeting with the executives, where every team member participated to explain the difficulties they were facing with the work process. This meeting, which was supposed to address the issues and create a discussion about solutions, became an uncomfortable situation when it stretched close to 5 p.m., the time when, according to Dave's rule, everyone had to finish their work. This was the moment when a collective and crucial action took place. As the clock struck 5, every team member took one simple yet powerful action: they left the Zoom meeting right on time, leaving Dave and the executives stunned. Undoubtedly, this action wasn't just a personal response, but a unified message from the entire team. This was how we expressed our dissatisfaction and highlighted the irrationality of the management policy Dave was imposing. The synchronized exit wasn't just a way to show we wouldn't accept the rigid rules, it was a strategy that made the executives reconsider the management approach in the company. This was a significant moment, showing that sometimes change only comes when you dare to take action, even if it's a small one. This situation put pressure on Dave to make a change. He had no choice but to realize that overcontrol and strict regulations don't always lead to the desired results. In fact, more flexible changes are the key to improving productivity and maintaining employee motivation. And as for me and my team, that action wasn't just a simple protest, but a small but meaningful victory. It was an affirmation of our right to work in an environment where everyone can showcase their creativity and work effectively. After this action, we celebrated our small victory together, enjoying a happy hour. Of course, after 5 p.m., according to the very rule we just achieved. This story contains valuable lessons about the importance of maintaining flexibility in the workplace, as well as the power of unity within a team. It reminds us that sometimes change needs to come from small yet determined actions. If you found this story interesting and full of valuable lessons about management and the importance of creating a comfortable and efficient work environment, don't forget to support, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories and shares. I work in a small to medium-sized tech company as a software developer. The company has an open work environment where team members are encouraged to be creative and think independently. My team has always worked in a relaxed and flexible manner, without being bound by rigid rules about working hours or methods. Instead, we focus on achieving the end results, not on how long we sit glued to our desks. This has helped create an atmosphere full of creativity and productivity, where everyone can unleash their potential during the most convenient working hours for them. We always ensure that projects are completed on time, with high quality, and that customers are satisfied with the products we deliver. Moreover, the team spirit is always high because everyone feels free and respected, and the relationships between team members are very close. Every time we complete a project, we celebrate together, not only because the work is done but also because the collective efforts of the team have brought success. However, everything started to change when the company decided to appoint a new project manager. His name was Dave, and from the very first meeting, I felt a stark difference in the way he viewed work compared to us. While we valued flexibility and freedom in work to be able to create and achieve maximum effectiveness, Dave brought a completely different management style, something we had never experienced before. Dave had just transferred from a large, strict corporate environment where every process and directive was closely monitored. In contrast to our open and free work style, Dave brought a totally different approach. He believed in proper work management, which, in his view, meant controlling everything in minute detail, as if every action needed to be tracked and recorded down to the last minute. He had no faith in the flexibility we had been practicing, and he constantly tried to impose strict regulations to control all aspects of the work, from planning to execution. At first, he started scheduling daily status meetings, which we had never done before. These meetings weren't necessary because we were used to managing our own tasks and reporting when needed. However, Dave required us to report everything, even the smallest steps in our work process, and these meetings became a burden instead of an opportunity to exchange ideas and improve the work. Each meeting dragged on with little practical value, but Dave didn't see any problem with holding them daily because he considered them the only way to track and adjust in time. Next, Dave asked all of us to fill out a timesheet every hour, a request that none of us had ever thought was necessary before. Previously, we only needed to ensure that work was completed on time without worrying about recording every minute of our work. But for Dave, tracking every hour was indispensable, and he believed that only then could the work be effectively supervised. This created tension for everyone, as we not only had to focus on the quality of our work but also had to ensure there were no mistakes in our timesheets. Finally, Dave imposed an extremely strict work schedule. He required everyone to adhere to the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. working hours, with no long breaks in between and no working outside of office hours, even if the job required it. This not only hindered flexibility in our work but also made everyone feel restricted. We were used to working when we felt most effective, whether it was early in the morning or late in the afternoon, and flexible hours were an important part of how we maintained high productivity. However, with Dave, all of this no longer mattered, as he only believed in working strictly by the clock, with minimal breaks, and not allowing creativity to flourish freely. One day, during a performance-tightening period, a term we had started to get familiar with since Dave's arrival, he sent the entire team an email announcing the new policy he had implemented. The policy required all programming work to be completed within office hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This not only contradicted the flexible working method we had built over time, but also created a major obstacle to the creativity that is essential in programming work. Programming is not a job that can be effectively completed within a fixed time frame. It requires deep focus and unpredictable creativity. Sometimes, major breakthroughs in problem-solving only come at unforeseen moments, whether it's late at night when the mind is alert, or during late afternoon when ideas suddenly emerge. It is this flexibility that allows us to make the most of the working hours when our bodies and minds feel the most comfortable and effective. However, Dave did not understand this. He not only required us to work within office hours, but also justified it by saying it was to ensure collaboration and supervision, as if people could only work well when being closely monitored every step of the way. This was a real lack of understanding of the nature of creative work. Programming is a job that requires continuous focus in solving complex problems that sometimes need quiet, uninterrupted time. However, Dave wanted all of us to adhere to a rigid process, completely lacking the necessary flexibility. We were extremely disappointed, but what frustrated everyone more was Dave's firm and decisive attitude in imposing this policy. He left no room for flexibility, with no concessions made for the nature of our work. At the end of the email, Dave concluded with a very decisive and challenging statement: "If you think you can find a loophole, think again. Follow the rules, or we'll find someone else to do it." This statement not only showed a lack of respect for the team but was also a clear threat. He presented a simple but pressure-filled choice: comply, or be replaced. This raised tension within the team, as we not only felt that our work was being excessively controlled but also felt threatened about our jobs and careers. This statement was a clear indication that, for Dave, following the rules was far more important than our creativity and actual work performance. Challenge accepted, Dave. That phrase echoed in my mind as I read Dave's email. Part of me felt cornered, with no choice but to accept and comply with his demands. but another part couldn't stand the idea of submitting myself and the whole team to such an ignorant policy. So, I decided to comply, absolutely and meticulously. But not in the way Dave expected. I programmed exactly from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., not a minute earlier, not a second later. Every day, I stared at the clock, feeling every second pass while I tried to complete the work, unable to work overtime. This was a challenge not only technically but also mentally. The suffocating feeling every time I encountered a bug that couldn't be fixed right away, or when I was in the middle of a complex code section and was getting closer to a solution, but had to stop because work hours were over. Those moments were the most uncomfortable. I knew that if I just worked a little longer, I could resolve the issue immediately. But no, 5 p.m. was the deadline, and I had to respect that, whether I liked it or not. This made me feel like I no longer had control over my own work. Every decision, every choice was constrained by a rigid framework that couldn't be changed. However, I wasn't the only one who felt frustrated by this policy. My colleagues, who were also used to working flexibly and creatively, were also losing their patience. They had once been very comfortable with working hours, able to work late when needed or take advantage of free time to resolve issues. But now, they too began to follow my way of doing things, adhering meticulously to Dave's rules. No one said anything, but we all felt the frustration. We didn't want to be treated like students in a school, being monitored and forced to follow unreasonable rules that didn't suit the creative work we were doing. Each of us carried a sense of dissatisfaction, but no one spoke it out loud. Instead, we silently followed the rules, as if a quiet rebellion had begun, and we didn't want to give up. Anyway, this created a strange situation within the company. Projects that were previously completed quickly and efficiently were now starting to take longer. Tasks that could once be completed in a few days now took a whole week because we could no longer make use of productive hours outside regular working hours to solve problems. Everything became heavier and slower than ever before. However, we continued to comply because it was the only way we could respond to this policy without facing direct criticism or tension from Dave. The result of this change was truly unsurprising. Projects that we could have completed quickly and efficiently within a few weeks now started to stretch significantly. Although the time didn't change, the team's performance decreased noticeably. Tasks that we could easily have finished in a few days if we could work overtime or flexibly now took much longer to complete, just because we couldn't make use of those precious productive moments that would usually appear late in the afternoon. Before, we were used to being able to switch into work mode during late hours when our minds were in the groove, and ideas naturally began to flow. These after-hours moments were usually when we found breakthrough solutions to difficult problems, without being interrupted by unnecessary meetings or supervision. However, now, with Dave's rigid policy, we could no longer make use of these valuable hours. Everything had to be completed within office hours, and this reduced the flexibility needed for creative work. We could no longer work when our minds are sharpest, but instead had to chase the clock mechanically. The team's workflow, which used to be smooth and efficient, has been severely disrupted. Previously, we could work seamlessly in a comfortable space, depending on each individual's abilities and needs. Every team member was able to adjust their work pace, which enhanced creativity and productivity. But now, everything is governed by a strict framework, leaving no room for flexibility. Each project must follow a fixed timeline, regardless of the nature of the work or its complexity. Situations that require working overtime, like dealing with serious bugs or complex issues, can no longer be addressed immediately because the workday is over. This has made everything harder and slowed down our ability to complete tasks. The quality of work has also started to decline over time. Although we still meet deadlines, the results are no longer at the level of perfection they once were. The lack of flexibility in our work process has hindered our ability to maximize productivity at critical moments. Work is no longer approached with enthusiasm and creativity but with stress and time pressure. We have begun to feel exhausted from working under a rigid system that doesn't allow us to perform at our best. It feels like we are trapped in an endless cycle with no way out, and no one on the team feels satisfied with their work anymore. Dave, of course, has noticed the drastic changes in the team's performance. While he may not fully understand the reasons behind these changes, he can't ignore the fact that projects are starting to be delayed, and tasks that could previously be completed in a short time are now dragging on with no clear explanation. His confusion and worry have only increased as productivity reports show a decline, and metrics fall short of expectations. He faces a reality he can't deny: his decisions, although made with good intentions, have significantly impacted the team's morale and productivity. Realizing the situation, Dave has had to prepare to answer the board about the sudden drop in productivity and lack of commitment that he can't deny. However, Dave knows full well that the real cause is not a lack of effort or commitment from the team but the consequences of the new policy he imposed. While he understands that we are unhappy with this management style, he has no choice but to report to higher-ups that we are no longer maintaining the productivity we once had. This forces him to face a difficult situation and prepare for the upcoming meeting with the board, where he will need to explain the reasons for the delays in key projects. When the board decides to hold an impromptu Zoom meeting at 4:30 p.m. to address the delays in the projects, the entire team joins, feeling nervous but also determined to provide our explanation. 4:30 p.m. is no coincidence. It is the time we have been forced to comply with Dave's rigid hours policy, making us feel that this meeting is, in part, a challenge to our compliance. None of us really wants to attend this meeting, but we all understand that it is an opportunity to voice the difficulties we've been facing. By the time the meeting takes place, the atmosphere in the team is truly tense. We all know that if we can't explain the problems we are encountering, Dave may be forced to take responsibility for the delays, and we will all face criticism. However, this meeting also serves as a chance for us to speak up, to explain how Dave's rigid policy has disrupted our work and affected our productivity. We are not only forced to work within strict office hours, but also our most productive times, those moments when we can solve problems quickly and effectively, have been stifled by this lack of flexibility. This policy has not only slowed down our work but also reduced the quality of our output, and we feel this cannot continue. In the meeting, Dave spends the first half hour blaming and reprimanding the team members. His criticisms are not just focused on unfinished work but also on the attitude and commitment of each individual on the team. He blames the decline in productivity without once taking responsibility for his own decisions that have caused the situation to become so dire. Instead of objectively recognizing that his 9-to-5 rigid hours policy is the main reason productivity has dropped, Dave criticizes us for not meeting the work standards he set. He doesn't realize that these regulations have disrupted our natural work rhythm, leading to delays in projects and a drop in the quality of our work. This made the atmosphere in the meeting room even heavier and more tense than ever before. Each of Dave's criticisms felt like a slap in the face, especially when he tried to completely shift the blame onto us without acknowledging how his new policy has affected the team's work process. We've tried our best to maintain productivity and quality under harsh conditions, but all we received was criticism with no empathy or understanding from him. Throughout the meeting, none of us dared to speak up in protest because we all knew doing so would only escalate the tension. Instead, we had to remain silent, listening to Dave's reproaches while our frustration and discontent grew with every passing minute. As the meeting neared its end and the clock in the virtual meeting room ticked closer to 5 p.m., the atmosphere became even more tense. Every second felt like a weight bearing down on us, and I knew my colleagues were feeling just as I was, a profound exhaustion, not only from Dave's criticisms but from the sense of injustice that was unfolding. We began exchanging messages in our team chat, quickly planning our next move. Everyone agreed that this was our opportunity to clearly express our dissatisfaction, and no one wanted to miss the chance to react to the oppressive policy that Dave had imposed on us. As 5 p.m. approached, we all knew that Dave's policy had reached its breaking point. With the meeting coming to an end, none of us wanted to endure this oppression any longer. We decided to act in unison, clearly and decisively expressing our opposition. Finally, when the clock struck 5 p.m., all of us clicked the leave meeting button at the same time, with no more explanations or compromises needed. We weren't just leaving the meeting, we were walking away from this policy, so that Dave and the board would understand we could not continue working under such conditions. At that exact moment, when the clock in the virtual meeting hit 5 p.m., one of the team members, who had patiently sat through half an hour of unfounded criticism from Dave, suddenly spoke up. His voice rang clear in the virtual space, and we all felt a shift in the atmosphere. He said, "According to Dave's 9-to-5 policy, we must log off now." His words, seemingly simple, contained a carefully planned resistance strategy that had been building throughout the meeting. It was the moment when we had all grown too weary of the oppression from Dave's rigid policies and were determined to make our dissatisfaction known, with no doubt. Immediately, no one in the group hesitated or wavered. Every member of the team, from the newest to the most veteran, acted in unison, knowing that this action would send a strong message to Dave and the board. Without any discussion or debate, we all clicked the leave meeting button at the same time, leaving the meeting room empty with only Dave, stunned and confused, facing the board. That moment could be considered the climax of the silent struggle between the team and the policy Dave imposed. We didn't need to say another word, the unified action of the entire team spoke for itself. This wasn't just a simple decision to log off, it was a symbol of solidarity and determination to rise up against an unfair system. Dave, who always thought he could control everything by imposing strict rules, had been overthrown by his own regulations. He certainly couldn't have imagined that under the appearance of silence and submission, the entire team had silently prepared and acted together. As we left the meeting, leaving Dave to face the board, he surely realized that his policy had gone too far and was now causing consequences. Dave's shock was inevitable, as he always believed he could control every situation with power and orders. However, now he understood that his team wasn't something that could be managed mechanically. We had shown that we had the right to speak up and defend creativity, freedom at work, and, most importantly, we would not accept unfairness. Finally, leaving Dave to face the board alone was a statement that this team could not be oppressed, could not be forced into a mold without recognition or respect for our creative work. We didn't just leave the meeting, we left behind all the unreasonable control and pressure he had tried to impose on us. This sudden collective exit, though a simple action like logging off the meeting, immediately exposed the flaws in Dave's strict policy. It not only made Dave, but also the board, reassess how they were managing the work and their team. The unity and decisiveness of the team highlighted the impracticality and inefficiency of the harsh regulations Dave had tried to enforce. After all, a rigid policy like that couldn't reflect the flexibility and creativity our work required, especially in the tech industry, where innovation and productivity often come from non-fixed working hours, when inspiration strikes. Thus, this collective exit made it clear to the board that change was inevitable. They couldn't continue enforcing a policy that caused dissatisfaction and hindered employee creativity just to maintain an appearance of discipline or efficiency. What had happened wasn't just a small crisis during a Zoom meeting but a clear message about the shortcomings in their management approach. This quickly became an event remembered and spread within the company, known as the 5 p.m. Zoom Exodus. This name not only reflected the time of the Exodus but became a symbol of resistance against unreasonable rules, and a testament to the power of unity at work. This event led to another emergency meeting, where Dave was publicly reprimanded by the board. Dave's embarrassment and discomfort in facing the failure of his policy was inevitable. He had to endure criticism from the directors and face the reality that his decisions had caused disruptions and reduced productivity across the entire team. After this meeting, Dave had no choice but to cancel the strict policies he had imposed. Instead, he was required to change and apply a more flexible policy, allowing employees to work in their own way, as long as the work results met the requirements. This new policy not only helped restore creativity and productivity but also helped rebuild the relationship between the board and the team. As for me and my team, after all the stress and pressure we had endured, we couldn't help but feel satisfied with our small victory. Although it was just a simple action, it had great significance because we had won not just against an unfair policy, but against the lack of respect for how we worked. After the meeting, and waiting for the positive changes to come, we celebrated this victory with an hour of drinks, of course, after 5 p.m., according to the new policy. This was a moment where we could relax, feel the relief, and be proud of standing up for what was right, while strengthening our unity as a team. A small victory, but one that meant so much. This story is a clear demonstration of the power of flexibility at work and the important role of maintaining a positive work environment, where creativity and productivity are not hindered by overly rigid rules. The story of the team in a tech company is not only an example of resistance against unrealistic policies but also a lesson about standing up to protect rights and respect in the workplace. Sometimes, important changes in the work environment only come when we dare to take clear and collective action. The biggest lesson we can learn from this story is, effective policies must be built on a foundation of understanding and respect for the needs and specifics of each individual in the team. Sometimes, change doesn't have to be huge, but it can be a small, unified, and determined action that creates a big turning point. Always remember that an ideal work environment isn't one with strict regulations, but one where each person can unleash their full potential in a free and flexible space. And don't hesitate to stand up if you feel something is unfair or unreasonable in your work. The advice for the character in the story, or more specifically, the team in this situation, is to not hesitate to stand up and speak out when you feel that management or imposed policies are harming the work and morale of the team. However, it is also important to note that resistance and demands for change should be done strategically and thoughtfully. Before acting, make sure you fully understand the specific issues the new policy is causing and be prepared to offer reasonable alternative solutions. Change is not always easy and may face opposition from higher-ups, but when you and your colleagues share a common goal and act collectively, you will have the strength to alter the work environment to better suit everyone's needs and work effectiveness. Finally, remember that flexibility and adaptability are always key to success in the modern workplace, and mutual respect will help build a strong, united team.